So good evening and welcome. I see that we're just at 6:00 p.m. here, so I'm going to get us underway. My name is Michael Fott. I'm a superintendent of education with the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the first session that we have in our virtual spring speaker series this year, Helping Our Kids Thrive. I do want to let you know off the hop that the session is being recorded so that we can post it later on the website and share for folks that were not able to join live. So, but just wanted to let you know that that is happening. And I'm going to start tonight by doing two things. First, giving a land acknowledgement, and then providing an opening prayer. So if you'll just join me in centering yourself. We start by saying that the Algonquin and Lakeshore Catholic District School Board is situated on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. We acknowledge their enduring presence on the sacred land, as well as the presence of the Métis, Inuit, and other First Nations from across Turtle Island. We honor their cultures and we celebrate their commitment to this land. Every year at Algonquin and Lakeshore, we have a different and unique pastoral theme. And this year we have a prayer that is connected to our pastoral theme, beloved children of God. So I invite you to join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as I say our pastoral theme prayer. Loving God, you see us and love us as we are, beautifully and wonderfully made. Help us to see ourselves and others with your same loving eyes. Help us to fully understand that you are always with us, even when we feel alone. Help us to accept your unconditional love, even on the days when we feel unloved. Help us to joyously and freely live like we're loved. Guided by the Holy Spirit, may we be a community that lifts each other up and instills hope with our words and actions, so we may share God's unconditional love with everyone we meet. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight, Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic District School Board staff and families, to this first session of our 2022 virtual spring speaker series under the heading of Helping Our Children, or Helping Our Kids Thrive. We start our sessions this spring with a very special guest, Dr. Andrew B. Campbell, who we'll introduce shortly. But I just wanted to give you some context. Our schools and our system has had a great focus on equity in the last couple of years. And Dr. Campbell has been working with our staff, particularly with secondary equity teams and with our elementary administrators this entire year, and providing us with guidance and giving us great things to think about when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And he's helping us to make our schools even better through the work that we're doing with him. So I'm very pleased to turn over the job of introducing Dr. Campbell to our two student trustees, Abby Owes and Alyssa Pfeiffer. Abby and Alyssa, if you would do me the honor of introducing Dr. Campbell tonight. Thank you.
I think Alyssa's sound is just lagging, but I think she's starting. Sorry.
I think her mic might be on mute. Abby, do you want to can you run the full thing?
Yeah,
Thanks
okay. Dr. Andrew B. Campbell, DR.ABC, is a graduate of the University of Toronto with a PhD in Educational Leadership, Policy, and Diversity. He is an Ontario certified teacher and has been an educator for over 25 years in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and Canada. He is presently an academic coordinator and faculty member in the Master of Teaching program at OISE at the University of Toronto, and an adjunct assistant professor at Queen's University in Professional Master of Education. He has authored 2 books, Teachable Moments with Dr. ABC, A Spoonful for the Journey, and The Invisible Student in the Jamaican Classroom. He is also He also has a number of publications in journals and book chapter focusing on areas EDI, 2S LGBTQI+ issues in education, racism, anti-Black racism, and educational leadership. He has presented at numerous conferences and has delivered many presentations as a workshop facilitator, keynote, and motivational speaker. He loves people, food, fashion, traveling, and bringing community together for a good meal.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just want to say it's very special, very, very special. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, to parents. I'm going to ask if the session is being recorded, but feel free to come on camera anytime you wish. Feel free to do so. The chat box is also open, the chat feature. As I'm presenting, I want you to feel free to have your opinion in the chat, to make a comment, to add a comment. I'm going to talk back to you. I'm going to talk with you, and I would love for you to share with me. So let's try that. Let's test that out. And I'm going to ask everyone to just say one word in the chat to tell me how you're feeling this evening. One word in the chat. Just place one word in the chat just to say how you're feeling. And happy, thank you, Kate, for starting us off there. Thank you, Kate, for starting us off. And like I said, Megan, happy to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So feel free to share, feel free to jump in. This is not new for me. I speak to parents a lot. Yesterday, I had a blast. I had a blast yesterday, this very same time, at another school board, talking with a whole room full of parents. And it was just amazing, the conversations. And so we're talking about, thank you so much. I see the comments. I see the comments. I see the comments. Thank you so much. And so this afternoon or this evening, we're having a conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And as Michael shared with you all, this is a work that was started in the school board, the leadership, teachers. We are all trying to ensure that we are equipping ourselves to have a better school, equipping ourselves to have a better world, equipping ourselves to be better individuals, equipping ourselves to be better educators, better students, better families. And that is what we're doing. So we are having this conversation, Introduction to Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, under the theme, helping our kids to thrive. And so for me today, what I want to discuss with you for the next couple of minutes is the idea that inclusion begins at home. I want us to anchor that theme, that idea. Inclusion begins at home. You know, a lot of what we see happening outside in our society, and a lot of the concerns we have, and you know, some of the racist issues and the homophobic and the gender issues, and the disregard for respect, and the disregard for different culture, the disregard for difference. It is because some of these conversations are not happening as they should at home. I'm going to repeat something. I'm going to emphasize something. The conversations are not happening as they should, because I want you to listen to me carefully. The conversations are happening. They're happening whether you like it or not. They're happening automatically. They're happening because once we engage with each other, they're happening. And so what we want to do is to ensure as parents is that we are prepared, that we are more in tuned, we are more insightful in how we go about these conversations. And so I want to start with a very simple picture of a box of crayon, and liken this to what could we learn from a box of crayon. We could learn a lot. As you look on this box of crayon, I want you to realize, you know, some are sharp, some are pretty, some are dull, some are weird, some have weird names. I remember the first time I heard the color fuchsia. I will never forget, fuchsia. I was like, what color is that? Fuchsia, you know? And so, you know, I have learned to fall in love with so many different new and weird color names. Some are different, some are broken, Some need sharpening. Some the paper is torn off them. Some they're brand new, never been used. But they all live in the same box. I want you to look at the crayon and think about yourself. Think about, you know, the school, your association, your school board. And I want you to recognize that this is an analogy that is very important because we are all from different spaces. We are all from different backgrounds. Some of us, we grew up in different neighborhoods. Some of us, we weren't Catholic at, you know, from birth. Some of us, we are immigrants. Myself, I'm from Jamaica. Some of us, we speak with an accent. I speak with a Jamaican accent. Many of us, we are different color and different color tones. We are different. How do we then ensure that as a school, that we are inclusive, we are respectful of each other? We know how to show empathy. We know how to honor and respect differences, because those are the language, those are the words we want to talk about this evening. All right. So I have a few questions I want to do to start the conversation. I have a few questions I want to start the conversation. And one of those, the first question is, what lessons are we teaching our children about others? First question. Second question, what assumptions do we hold about others? I have seen so many times, I have been into so many places, and a child will say and you'll hear a child say, Mom, why is that man walking like that? Dad, why is that person looking like that? Dad, why is he walking with a stick? Grandma, why is she eating that? So what I'm saying is the conversations about what is different, who is different, what different looks like is happening. Our job tonight is to discuss how are we handling those conversations? What messages do we give to our children about others? Something comes on the television, your children laugh. What is it funny? Is it sarcastic? Is it rude? Should we be laughing? Those are the things we need to be asking ourselves. Now, let me start with a story. I tell a lot of stories. Hopefully, you get a few stories this afternoon. And I'll share with you one very important one. In 2001, I went to teach in the USA. I'm from Jamaica, of course. I went to teach in the USA. And I went on a teacher exchange program. And I was in Atlanta, in the outskirts of Atlanta. And I was in a school with a particular program that bus the children to the school from the inner city area and from some of the rural outskirts area. And so these children have never traveled. They have never been, most of them have never been downtown Atlanta. So they're quite unexposed. And because they're quite unexposed, they have a single story of others. They also have some assumptions, some stereotypes, some biases based on what they see on TV. And so when I got to the school, my kids were, excited, and they would ask me questions. They said to me, because I realized I was from Jamaica, and they asked me if I live in a tree house. And they asked me if I swim every day. And they asked me, where's my locks? They couldn't see my locks. They could, my head was bald just like this. And they asked me about my locks. And they asked me if I know Bob Marley. What they were doing is communicating with me through a single story. So sometimes very sad and bad assumptions, very sad and bad stereotypes. So ask yourself, what are some of those learnings? I use that word very intentional. What are some of those learnings that are happening at home about other people? And remember, I did say to you, whether you teach or not, there are learnings happening with your children in the homes about other people. As they watch the news, right now we're seeing the war. As they're watching what's going on in the war and the news and social media, and they're hearing the word refugee, can we honestly say that the meaning of refugee is the meaning they had a month ago? Because a month ago, in many spaces, a refugee was somebody Black, someone in Africa, someone living in a tent somewhere, or Afghanistan in a tent somewhere, hungry, half naked, and just have nothing. Because that's the media projection. Now all of a sudden, we see a different looking kinds of people being described as refugees. And we see they are not in tents. And we see they are coming from homes that they own. But this is not new, parents. Because for years, I've been saying to parents, the narrative of who's a refugee, we need to make sure we are careful how we say those things. Because there are many people who have great lives, better than ours, in many cases, and they became refugees because of war, or because of sexual orientation, or because of other things, or because of racism, or because of other things. So my next question, what emotions are shown when we discuss differences? What are the conversations about issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion? Is there a demonstration of empathy in your home? So let me go into my second story, everybody. So years ago, I was teaching at a school, and there was, I'm sure many of your parents will remember, there was a Syrian refugee crisis. Syrian refugee crisis. And I was teaching grade 6 where we had to talk about refugees. And so we were talking about the present situation, Syrian refugee crisis. So if your child comes home talking about the war, just understand that these are themes within our curriculum. We want our children to be global citizens. We want our students to be, our children to be culturally conscious. And I have to say this at the beginning. We have to remember the world is bigger than your cul-de-sac. I want to repeat that. The world is bigger than your cul-de-sac. And we have to understand that. And remember, as I'm talking to you, I am seeing the chat. So feel free to jump in the chat and share. Last night I was at an event and the parents were just talking back to me. If you have a question that comes up, you can drop it in the chat. I may definitely later on get to it, or surprisingly, I may respond to that question right in the middle of the presentation. It is not a chat that is closed. It's open. At the school board, we intentionally wanted to open the chat so we can engage with each other. We are not here to talk to you or to tell you. We are here to discuss as a community. So feel free to share because we are here as a community. All right. So let me get back to my story. And so I finished teaching that evening, that day, social studies, and my students, amazing students, they went home. The next morning, a parent came to the school to see me. And she said, Mr. Campbell, I want to talk to you. She said, yesterday, my child came home and she was telling me all about the refugees and the Syrian refugee crisis and all was happening. And she was so sad, she cried. And so she was concerned that her child cried. Her child heard and saw someone hurting. Our child heard and saw someone in desperation, someone who did not have school books and bags and snacks and fancy clothes and things like her, and she cried. And so the parent said to me, Mr. Campbell, could you allow her to go to the library when you're teaching this tomorrow? Because maybe I'd want her to, to not be in class when it's going on. And I looked at her and I said to her, your child is a star. I said, I wish all my children would have the same response. I said, your child saw hurt. She saw disadvantage. She saw pain. And she was moved with empathy. She was moved with empathy. We're a Catholic board. We always talk about, and Jesus was moved with compassion. And then we always pray, oh, to be like him. So I want us to understand. I want us to understand the importance, the value of what is happening when a child is moved with compassion, when a child shows empathy. This is what we want. And so on that day, she left and I continued the conversation with the class, and the child stayed, and we had the best class ever. And then that child did something that made me proud, even more proud as a teacher. What she did at that immediate time, we wrote letters to the government of Canada, imaginary letters to the government of, well, real letters to the government of Canada, saying why we would want the refugee children to come to our school. And she had one of the most beautiful letters. So as we continue this conversation today, we have to remember that we need courageous conversation, and they begin at home. We have to evaluate our personal biases and our prejudice that have impacted our view of others. I know teachers right now who are sad because when they teach the same kinds of lessons, they cannot get their 11 and 12-year-old to understand empathy. They are laughing, they are smiling, they are ridiculing difference. It begins at home. What conversations are we having, parents, with our children? And I hope you realize I'm prepared for this conversation. This is what we call a courageous conversation. As we unpack the third bullet on our wall, it talks about identifying patterns of discrimination and inequalities and injustices in our community. Are you able to identify those things in your community? A lot of us like to talk about we are allies. Everybody now said they're an ally and you're an advocate. Are you truly an ally and an advocate? Because it's more than paperwork. It starts here. It's heart work. Equity is heart work. Equity is heart work. It begins here. How you treat your neighbor, how you have conversation about people. So I wanted to think about that. So what is equity? Equity, by this definition, I love this simple definition. It's a condition of a state fair of inclusion, respectful. But what I love about the definition, it talks about a conscious, willful behavior to recognize, accept, and operate, knowing that we are all different. Knowing that we have fairness towards individuals, and knowing that we will need different things. Then we talk about diversity. And you see the many ways in which people are diverse. It's more than just your skin color. It's about your skills, your job level, certain cultural practices, religion, language, ethnicity, your perspective, your thinking styles, your age. And I love this definition. It says the conscious, I love that word, acceptance that differences exist. The conscious acceptance, belief, recognition, and thought that differences exist. It's a conscious way. You know, many times people don't see each other. We have a race problem because many of us, we don't see each other. We have to be more conscious about each other. See our foods, see our differences. I remember years ago, there was an issue in a particular school with the Asian population, Asian children, and it was surrounding food and lunch. And we have Asian children who are ashamed or afraid to bring their lunch to school because they were being ridiculed about their lunch. And a very beautiful book came out. I will never forget. You could Google it on Amazon. It says, "Don't Yuck My Yum." And I use that book in school. And I know parents who bought the book. And I encourage parents to buy the book, to teach your children about differences, to be respectful of differences. Don't yuck my yum. Ask yourself, what am I doing at home to ensure that I'm fostering an inclusive environment, that I'm ensuring that my child understands differences and understand the value in inclusion and understand that we need to respect people because they're different food, different clothes, different language, different accents. different families. Are we talking about the family next door? Your family has a mom and a dad. Are we talking about the family with a mom alone? Are we talking about the family who's the grandma is the head of the house? There's maybe no dad and 2 aunties there. Are we giving value to other families? Or we are pretending that your family is real and everybody else's family is fake? Is that the language we're using? I know I'm coming at you strong because I'm a teacher for 25 Septembers. I have seen this many times. And I see your question, Michelle. Absolutely. The book is called Don't Yuck My Yum. Don't Yuck My Yum. And I'm going to share some others as well. So I want us to think about that. Now we go to our slide. Now we get a little deeper in this conversation. And I want you to understand, I'm sure a lot of persons says, when I went to high school or when I was in school, we used to talk about equality a lot. Now I realize we are not talking about equality. My child is coming home and they're talking about equity. The reason being, you're welcome, Michelle. The reason being, equality says we're going to give everybody the same thing. We all need the same thing. We all have to eat the same thing, do the same thing, just be fair. We want to be fair so everybody gets the same thing. What the problem with that is that we are all not at the same space and the same place. We have all not had the same experience. I remember as a young teacher, we used to teach our kids the usual summer writing, my summer vacation. And it was assumed that we all traveled. I was a young teacher and I've never been on a plane at that time. At that time, I've never been on a plane and many of my children had traveled, but we took it for granted that everybody had traveled. Everybody had been on a plane. Everybody had, had a family with a mom and a dad. Everybody had certain financial stability. When pandemic hit, parents, we said, go home. And we said, go on your device. We took it for granted that everybody had a device. That's privilege. We took it for granted everybody had a mom or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or some adult home to stay home to look after the children and to go to school with them at the same time. We took it for granted that everybody had a camera and good lighting like me. Anybody love my lighting? You get to see my good skin. Anybody love my lighting? You had good lighting. You had a good background like Mr. Campbell. And you have at a home office. We took these things for granted. And then we start to understand we all do not have the same experiences. And so what we're trying to foster is an environment where we respect equity that says we are different. And what can we do to ensure that we help each other? But the sad news is that here is the reality. The reality when you look around us in many spaces is that we are seeing a disparity. We are seeing a disadvantage. We are seeing some of our children who are marginalized. We are seeing some of our children who are being bullied for different reasons. We are seeing the exclusion. We are seeing the teasing. We are seeing the name calling. As a matter of fact, this morning on CP24, there was a report of another school where students had experienced hate. There was an incident of hate in another school. There was an incident in another school of anti-Semitism. An incident, a racist incident in another school, an anti-indigenous incident at another school. A teacher complained to me this week about a group of students she had who she was talking about First Nations, and they were literally mocking and being sarcastic. These boys who are doing that, let me be very honest with you and very frank, because that's who I am. They go home to parents. They go home to a home. How are we having conversations about differences, parents? But we want to move from this slide. And I want to go to this slide. Are we creating schools and families and homes and communities where people have a sense of liberation? Are we creating spaces where people feel liberated, respected, free to be and free to become, where we are looking at people who are different from us and we are knowing that difference is fine and they are different and I am different and it's good. How are we doing that? So here comes the juicy part of the presentation, everybody. And I'm going to leave with you, and I want you could take your camera, you could take pictures of my slide because you won't get a copy of the presentation. You'll get a copy of the video. It's going to be online. I'm sure you're going to have access to it, but you have my permission. You do have my permission to take pictures of any one of my slides. So what are the next steps, everybody? What are the next steps at home, parents? What are the next steps? Equity begins at home. Inclusion begins at home. Learning how to respect others begins at home. Empathy, care. So what we're going to encourage us to do, we're going to look at a number of things. So the first one we want to look at is how do we engage in courageous conversation with our children? We're going to also talk about how do we affirm our children. Parents, you must affirm your children in who they are. Nobody, no teacher can replace your love. No teacher should replace your love. Your love and affirmation comes first. We have a lot of our children coming to school struggling with self-esteem issues. Are you taking the time out, parents, to affirm your children? We're going to provide opportunities to learn about others and to unlearn some of the things that we have been misguided about. Misguided that because I'm from Jamaica, I'm supposed to love reggae music. Misguided that because I'm Black, I may have been to prison and jail. Because I'm from Jamaica, I maybe live in a treehouse. Because I'm from Jamaica, I may be poor. That's why I came to Canada. Those are the assumptions. Because you are Indian, because you are Asian, because you are LGBTQ, because you come from a rural area, because you do not speak English as your first language. We make these assumptions. We have to unlearn some of these assumptions. Speak about others with respect. We're going to seize opportunities to disrupt biases, assumptions, and stereotypes. We have to seize the moment to disrupt those things. Absolutely, Sean. Our assumptions come from our environment. None of us are born with assumptions. None of us are born with assumptions. We grow up and we see things and we make conclusions. All of us, including myself, we were brought up with certain knowledge and certain information. And because we don't have full information, then we try to fill in the blanks. All of us. That's why we talk about unconscious bias. We call them unconscious bias because we didn't get up one day and consciously says, well, I don't like that person, or I don't like that this, or I hate that. What we do is that these ideas, these stereotypes, these formations are formed based on the media. Let me give you a perfect example. Many of us grew up years ago, I was in America. And I was teaching, as I said it before, in Atlanta. And I'm from Jamaica. I've never seen anyone in person who wears a hijab, a Muslim. I have never seen someone in my life, like this who is a Muslim. Never. Never had a Muslim neighbor. Never know anybody who was Muslim. Went to Bahamas to live. Never met anybody in the Bahamas who were Muslim. Then I went to America. Never met anyone who was Muslim. But September the 11th happened. And I was living in America, and all of a sudden, there was a learning, an automatic learning that someone wearing an hijab, someone wearing a certain head covering, we automatically learn fear. And so people were talking about the fear of flying and the fear of playing because certain things happened. And because of those things that happened, which they really did happen, we make certain understanding. So immediately, what we did was that we made certain assumptions about these things. And so we have to be careful about how we make assumptions. And we have to work at unlearning some of these, what I would call unhealthy assumptions. bad assumptions, dark assumptions, dangerous assumptions that will marginalize and hurt somebody else. We're talking about assumptions. I see you, Jen. Assumptions that are archaic, that we learn about people who were this like 50, 70, 90, 200 years ago, and we still stand by those things. And so we have to do the unlearning. So thank you so much for that question. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely important that we have these. And like I said to you, I hope you understand that these are courageous conversations. Let me say to many parents who sometimes maybe this is the first time you have participated in any kind of courageous conversation. I do understand if you walk away thinking, well, I disagree with that, because these are courageous conversations. They will make some of us uncomfortable. They will make some of us feel certain level of fragility, because this is not the usual conversation you're used to. But that is my job. That is my job, to engage in courageous conversations. Let the home be a place of learning and unlearning. And the most powerful one for me is be an inclusive role model. So the first one, let's go to the first one. Engage in courageous conversations. These are powerful conversations, but this is what I always tell parents. Do not start from what I consider to be the big conversation. Start with the little ones. Start with the little ones. I live in a neighborhood here, and I know there are many neighborhoods that new neighbors move in and nobody speaks to them. I could give you stories upon stories. So you know what I have done in my neighborhood where I live in a very beautiful neighborhood. Whenever a family moves in, I make it a point of my duty to go and say welcome. Simple conversations. When you go to the museum, let's give an example. Another example. I have been to the ROM many times with children and by myself. And I've been to the First Nations section of the ROM. And I have overheard parents numerous times having conversation with their children and different spaces on the plane or many places about people who are different. And you ask yourself, how are you having that conversation about difference? How are you having that conversation about difference? So we have to have them. Let me give you a beautiful, courageous conversation. I have a friend of mine, a parent I know. She has 3 girls. 3 girls. She's white and she has 3 beautiful girls. Oh, HS, I love your comment. They are scary to start. Oh, they are very scary sometimes. And that's why I said to you, start from the simple ones. Let me give you HS. Let me give you a good example. Let me give you one when I'm talking about the parent. Watch this conversation, HS. So she's a white parent. She's 3 beautiful little girls. And she said to me that our girls love Barbie dolls. And so she buys Barbie dolls. And I visited her once and I was quite taken aback by her Barbie doll collection. She has Barbie dolls of every shape, size, color, hairstyle you could think of. She has black Barbie dolls, Asian Barbie dolls, brown Barbie dolls. She has Ken. She has a Barbie doll. For those who know, the Barbie doll has made a wheelchair Barbie doll. She has so many Barbie dolls. That is a powerful conversation. She already prepared her 3 girls that when they go out to school, they understand and respect differences. It's happening around us. We have to prepare our children to be global citizens. The next one is affirm your children in who they are. I want us to learn as parents and to remind ourselves, remind ourselves as parents that we are supposed to affirm our students. Affirm them in who they are. If they are short, they're tall, they have a lips, they have certain different abilities and certain neuro differences, and they are different color tone and color shade, and they come from different countries and they're immigrants and affirm your children in who they are. Build them strong from home. I always say to people, ensure you spend quality time loving people who are different from you. so you can build them instead of trying to be the best advocate out there when in fact you have no relationship with the people close to you. The next one we have is provide opportunities to learn about others. Now, this one is powerful. Even though the world tries to divide, it's an opportunity as parents to teach our children about God's awesome, unique design of all people. The example I just showed you about the parent and the 3 girls and the Barbie dolls, that is how you do different ways to teach. I remember when I was buying books for my niece, I bought a lot of books with people that looked very different from her as well. I wanted her to know that there's a big wild world out there and it's full of amazing people who are different from you. And I'm going to say this because Jen, you took the word from my mouth, Jen. Big tops to you, Jen. Is about teaching them the amazing difference out there. Exposure. That's the word. That's the word that I took from your sentence, Jen. Your comment. Thank you, Jen. Exposure. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. The world is bigger than your cul-de-sac. And let me say something, because you understand that I am that person who will share these things. We have many students in university who are struggling with their identity. Struggling. So I get, you may want to push back at me. That's fine. We do that another time. Struggling with their identity. You know why they're struggling? Because they go to university. They go to a very big, wide, global space. And they are shocked at the differences. And nobody taught them when they was in grade 1, kindergarten, grade 2. They feel like they were protected. I have heard students say to me, Dr. Campbell, I feel like my parents protected me and shielded me from knowing the world out there. And now I do not understand how to navigate the world. Parents, it's your job, like Jen just placed it there, to expose your children. Expose them. A quick story. I know a parent who went to Ethiopia with her child. And while they were in Ethiopia visiting for a big conference, the parent went for a big conference. They went to eat and they were eating injera, wash their hands, and they used their hands to eat Ethiopian food. If you ever been to an Ethiopian restaurant, you use your hand and they use it injera. And she said, Mom, where is the fork? And her mom spent the time to explain to her that we don't eat with fork here. These people use an injera and they use it to eat. And that parent was so proud because she said that happened when her child was 3. And about 2 years after, the teacher called her to say to her, there was a conversation at school, and she said, your little girl stood up and said, people are different. People have different clothes. They wear different, eat different food. They go different places. And she was telling a story about when she went to Egypt and people eat with their hands. She said, I was so proud of your daughter. And that child is exposed. She has a global view of the world. We need to get that. We speak about others with respect. How are we speaking about others? When you talk about difference, what does that look like? Are we saying, how are we describing? What adjectives are we using? I don't want to, I would never, spend time this evening to tell you the adjectives, because you have heard them. People use for different people of different race, different color, different practices, different religion. How are we doing that? I heard a child said to me a while back, well, not a child, he's a big man now. And he said to me, Dr. Campbell, it's hard for me to be in your equity class. He said to me, I have heard my parents say some really, really, really bad things about people who are different. And I sat him down and I said, we won't talk about that now because we can't change that. But I said, you are at a university. You are being open to difference. And I said, how do you have this conversation with yourself first and then with your family? And I said, I'm not telling you to go home and be rough with your parents. I said, no. I said, but you're going to sit and you'll have those conversations. He came back to me a couple of weeks after and he says, you know, I've been talking to my mom. I'm having some good conversation with my mom. And he said, my mom said she heard this from my grandmother. And she said, you know, we lived way up north. And she said, this is what we just know. She said, Dr. Campbell, I told them you were Black, and they were shocked that I had a Black professor. They were shocked. He said, Dr. Campbell, you are my first Black professor. I wonder what you think is the narrative out there in many spaces about us as Black professors. I can tell you there are research and textbooks out there that tells you about the deficit thinking and how some of us are seen as less valuable and less expert because of the color of our skins. We are seen as less than. How do we disrupt that? I could share with you maybe my good news, you know, just to share with you my good news. You are actually looking at the University of Toronto 2022 Awardee of Teaching of Excellence. That's me, Dr. Andrew B. Campbell, announced just yesterday. I shared it with you just for you to share as we are communicating, but I want you to understand as a person of color, as a person who is an immigrant, as a person who has a strong Jamaican accent, I have come up against many issues and a lot of issues of marginalization and exclusion and assumptions and stereotypes about who I am, where I'm from, what I do, and what is my value. When we look on the board, we have seen these stories. How do you teach your children to respect differences? I love this one. Seize the more opportunities to disrupt. Now, watch me carefully, parents. I'm using some strong words here, to disrupt. But I want to show you something very powerful. That disruption, I'm talking about in your home. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Kate. I see them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your love. That disruption we're talking about is in the home. It doesn't mean you're going to turn your table upside down and slam the door. You know, I tell people all the while, there are many ways to disrupt racism and inequalities and disrupt all the different biases. You can do it in many ways. When I walk across my street and I see a family comes in that is quite different from the neighborhood, I disrupt by making sure I go and give them a big old welcome and a bottle of wine, by the way. That's disrupting. That's disrupting. Thank you, Cynthia. That's disrupting, Cynthia. Because we have heard a conversation. Well, I don't think they belong in this neighborhood. I don't know if they bought the house. Maybe they are renting. And we are making those assumptions. We have heard them. Let's be honest. Don't pretend like you have never heard these conversations. And if you have never heard it, truly, congrats. Because many of us have heard these negative conversations. Where I live, in this neighborhood, I live in a beautiful home. I have had conversations with a neighbor next door who assumed that I did not own the house. The first day I came into my house, the neighbor saw I had a white contractor with me, a friend who was doing a job for me. And he said, welcome to the guy. And the guy turned to him and said, he's the owner. And he continued speaking to the white guy who was the contractor and ignored me. So when I say disrupt, let nobody say Dr. Campbell tell you to go downtown and march. Dr. Campbell tell you to go chain yourself to a gate. Dr. Campbell tell you to write 10 letters to the prime minister or to the premier. Dr. Campbell tell you go march to the school board and demand the superintendent and the director to do this. I didn't say that. I say start inside your home. When somebody says that person on the TV is gay, and I hear that they're gay and they're going to die of HIV, then you're going to turn around and engage your child in a conversation that says, no, you're not supposed to say that. Where did we hear that kind of nonsense? That's what you call it. And then you change the conversation. That's the power you have as a parent. I want you to ensure you understand that we have to disrupt. So this book here It was just a sample of books. As a matter of fact, I was at a school. I read that book over there, All Are Welcome. That one down there, it feels good to be yourself, with the person in the wheelchair and the person who's shy. I love that one. Talk about the shy child, because we have kids who are shy and they are bullied because they are shy. It's okay to be shy. It's okay to be shy. You have to teach that as well to your, and then the last, not the, well, almost the last one. I love this one, everybody. The learn and the unlearn. I know, isn't it strange that we're at a school board evening and we're talking about unlearning? Come on, Dr. ABC, man. We are here to learn, but we are also here to unlearn. I have to unlearn some things. Let me raise my hand first to tell you, I had to unlearn some things, and I still think, Cynthia, I have a funny feeling I have some more things I need to unlearn. I remember the first time I saw someone who was First Nations. I would never forget the person who was indigenous. I never knew anybody in Jamaica who were indigenous. We have no indigenous people in Jamaica. They were killed. They were wiped out by the Spaniards. All our indigenous people in Jamaica was wiped out. The Arawaks in the Caribbean, we have the Arawaks, we have the Caribs, we have the Mayas, we have the Incas. In Jamaica, the Arawaks were wiped out. We had no indigenous people. And for me, the first time I saw someone indigenous, I was like, whoa, that's amazing. These people have survived the colonizers. Whoa. Only to be given a quick, very bad lesson about indigenous people in Canada. Somebody was standing there and they said, well, these people are this and they're that and they're this and they're that. And everything was negative. You know what I did? I invested in my own unlearning, and I started to learn about indigenous people and the history of indigenous people in Canada. I learned about truth and reconciliation. I learned about treaty and how treaty happened and how many of persons were abused and marginalized. I learned about how indigenous people were moved from one fertile area and placed in a place where they couldn't even plant anything. You have to know the truth. These are honest truths about others. And so I start to unlearn these things. And today I have colleagues who are indigenous. I know students who are indigenous. Today I have my original respect for the power of survival and resilience. We have to unlearn. We have to unlearn when we see somebody in a wheelchair. Oh, she's in a wheelchair. They can't do nothing. Really? That is the learning that you have? That because somebody's in a wheelchair, they can't do nothing? Have you seen the Paralympics? Our teachers showing, because when I was a school teacher, when I was a class, I'm still a teacher, but in the classroom, I would show Paralympics in my classroom. I'd show my students what the wonderful things that persons with disability were doing. We have to expose those children. We have the job to do the exposure. We are responsible for our children to do the exposure. Someone who's blind, he's walking with a stick. How do we talk about that? A child who's autistic, a child who's on the autism spectrum. How are we talking about those? And the final thing for you this afternoon, this evening, as I close. Be an inclusive role model. I want you to be that role model. You have to be that role model, that inclusive role model. Start small. Hey, don't start no big conversation. When you hear the word courageous conversation, people want to rush to, I want to go to white supremacist conversation. I want to go to racism. I want to talk about indigenous. I want to talk about colonization. Can we go back to Christopher Columbus? No. That's not what we are here for. We are here to start with respect, to start with love, to start with caring, teaching our children empathy, teaching them how to respect other persons around you. That when you go to school and somebody have a food that is different, you don't say, well, that is nasty, what you're eating. No, it's different. You don't eat it because it's different, but it's just as beautiful and as yummy as our food or as your food. That's where we're starting. So I know sometimes when we have these conversations, some parents get quite excited and they think we're here to have conversations about other things. We're here to have conversations about ourselves and love. And Cynthia, I love your question, Cynthia. I'm going to give you the answer I gave a bunch of parents last night. And I'm going to be frank with you, Cynthia, because this is what I did. I love Amazon. I don't know if you're an Amazon person like me, Cynthia. I must confess, I love Amazon. When I see an Amazon box come to my door, Cynthia, I am so excited. You wouldn't believe it. When an Amazon box come to my door, I am so excited. I love a delivery, okay? I love a delivery. So what I did, Cynthia, I remember I Googled in Amazon, I Googled storybooks of children who are Black. And I Googled storybooks of LGBTQ. And I remember I Googled storybooks about Muslim kids. And that's where we saw that book about Big Blue. I had that book as well. Let me show you that screen again. I remember I had that book as well. That book that said, that one there, the blue, the one with the blue wave, the girl with the hijab and the blue wave. I had that book as well, right? And the book about names. Right, the book about names that they're hard to pronounce, right? And how we take the time out to learn those names, and how we stop to learn those names, right? So we have to be intentional about how we're doing this. So I would say start with that, Cynthia, and start with that. And I'm sure that the school board can spend some time, and maybe they have already put together reading lists that is great to learn about differences. I know Sarah Michael is with us. That may be something you want to do, put together a reading list. I actually have a reading list, but it's not for little children, it's for mostly adults, about books, about differences. I could share that with you, with Sarah as well. But it's something we could create. We could create our own, reading lists. And last thing I shared to you, also, Cynthia, because it's a powerful question you asked. I remember at the university, Cynthia, I was doing a teaching anti-discriminatory course. And one particular semester, I recommended 5 books to my class to use for an assignment. And there were 5 Indigenous books by Indigenous authors. As a matter of fact, on my bookshelf, I just noticed one right here. Indigenous rights. I love this one. Funny enough, it's right here on my bookshelf, right? Oh, there's another one here. Wow, I'm right in front of my bookshelf. My grandmother hands. And these I suggested to my university students, right? To buy these books, to learn about Indigenous people, right? And we did all of that kind of stuff. So we could unlearn. This other book right here. Wow, we're doing books tonight. We use residential school, and we had a conversation. So it's, Google, go to Google some good books, read them first, parent. When you get a book, parent, take a quick read first, especially if you have little kids. Don't just buy the book and just give it to them. Take a quick read or read it with them, because we have seen books that not so good, right? So as a parent, you want to make sure that you have done that. I want to say thank you, parents, for engaging me in this conversation. I really want to say thank you so much for engaging me in this conversation. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to make sure everybody come back on screen. If you want to close off and everybody come back together, we can do that. You can turn on your cameras to do a quick, good wave for everyone, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You don't have to if you don't want to, because we are still recording. Michael, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with your parents, where I'm going to be back again later on, I think in the month, to have a second conversation. I know there's going to be a second speaker and another. I think there are 3 different speakers. So you're going to have a multiple voices, great speakers, not just not me, but other great speakers who are going to talk about other amazing topics. Because remember, we are here because we want our children to thrive. I love that word, Michael, by the way, thrive. It's more than just growing, it's thriving. It's thriving, giving them what they need to be amazing. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. Michael, it's over, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell. We really, really appreciate you being here with us tonight. It's powerful, and your passion just comes through. And it just reminds us of the work that we, the important work that we're doing in our schools. And we're so fortunate to have you working with us and guiding that work that we're doing. Families, we're bookending the March break with Dr. ABC. You're very lucky. He's back with us on the 21st, Monday, the 21st at the same time, same channel. So we really look forward to seeing you again. And Dr. ABC, can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.